If you have ever bought a 22 branded scope, especially from a box store, or you're thinking about buying one, you need to watch this video first because the chances are you did not buy a scope that is magically great for 22. What you bought was a scam sold to you by a company pushing very cheap scopes on you and marketing them for 22, although they're the furthest from what you actually want. So in today's video, we're going to talk about optics as they pertain to 22, what you need to know if you're a first-time buyer, what you probably should know if you are a more seasoned precision rimfire shooter, what the necessities are, what is marketing hype, and what is actually going to yield you actual results on target for your application. So let's get into it. All right, so we're going to kick this video off on the things to avoid. We're also going to do a little bit of shooting because why not? But first things first, when it comes to 22 optics, a lot of companies take advantage of the fact that people think of a 22 as something you don't need a lot of scope for. And in a lot of regards, that can be very true. But what you often see is 22 branded scopes that are sitting in retail stores. They're marked for a 22. And really, they're pretty terrible. So some really good indicators or things I would avoid personally, and we're gonna get into this deeper and tell you why. Avoid scopes with fixed parallax for 22. For sure for 22, and we're gonna get really deep into that, and you're gonna understand why that makes way more difference on a 22 than it does a centerfire. Also, avoid BDC reticles, and that's a combination you're gonna find on a lot of cheap scopes in a store, is some fixed parallax scope with a BDC. And like I said, we're gonna get really deep into those. Let's get behind the gun. Let's do some shooting. I'm gonna show you what a good reticle system looks like, how to use it, and why you want the things that are on this scope, not necessarily this price. This is a very high-end Japanese scope. You don't need this. There's cheaper options, but the features on here and why they're so important to 22. And this is regardless of whether you're shooting squirrels, whether you're shooting paper targets, or whether you're shooting steel out to 300 and 400 yards, because it is on us, no matter what we're doing, to be the most accurate and the best shooters we can. So let's not let the scope system hold us back. All right, so let's talk parallax. First of all, what is it? Well, it's usually on some cheaper scopes, you'll have an adjustable parallax up front. On most scopes, they're gonna be on the side here. And most shooters would consider parallax like a focus. We're looking at 100 yards. If I parallax this to 50 yards, you can see the image becomes out of focus. Well, when we parallax it to 100, it becomes clear. Most people just, kind of assume that. It's to make it clear. In reality, that's a byproduct. What we're doing is we're putting the image and the reticle on the same plane. And I've talked about this before. If you think about this as two sheets of paper and they're an inch apart, if we poke a hole straight through that, we see a circle. But if we get the parallax and the image off plane as we move things out of alignment, even your body in relation to that, you can no longer see through them. So this basically stacks the image and the reticle on the same plane. What that means for you as a shooter is that as you get behind a rifle, no matter where your head is, when you are parallaxed correctly, your head position, that image and reticle will remain relative to each other. They will not move. Now, if you make the parallax dirty, out of focus, sometimes even if I back off magnification here, you can see we cheat this. We're at the same 50-yard parallax on that 100-yard target we were before, but with less magnification, you now see it looks clear. But it is still out of parallax. As we come in, you're gonna see it come out of that clarity. But the problem is when you are not on the correct parallax, when you move your head around behind the optic, that reticle moves. Even though the gun is completely still, that reticle moves. So when you buy a cheaper fixed parallax optic, if it's parallax at 50 yards, that works for 50 yards and that's about it. If it's parallax for 100 yards, you're stuck there. Now, the trick is, and what most people don't talk about, is the fact that 22 long rifle is susceptible to way more parallax error, right? And I say this because if you have a scope and you're looking at 300 yards and you parallax it for 7, the parallax error between 300 and 700 yards is actually not that much. It seems like it would be. It's 400 yards apart, but in reality, the closer distances are way more unforgiving. So if you have a parallax at 50 and you want to shoot at 25, that parallax error is really big. 50 to 100, really big. So for a centerfire, if it was fixed parallax at 100 yards and you're going to shoot 1 to 300 yards, you could probably get away with that. Like I said, for most people, they're gonna see this as an issue. This is, again, parallax for 50 yards. And you can see as we come in on 50, still pretty clean. And as we come into 100, it looks dirty. So most people just say, oh, we turn this till it gets clear. But the reality is this is for correcting error on where your head is. And when it's set right, it's gonna give you the most accurate results on target that you can possibly get. And when it's wrong, if you don't build an exact same position behind that rifle every single time, you are really handicapping yourself and your accuracy. All right, we're gonna do a little bit of shooting while we talk about our next one, but this is 100% a pet peeve of mine, and that is BDC reticles. Now, let me zoom out a little bit. You can see this is a mill reticle, but for all intents and purposes, this is a Christmas tree reticle. It has a bunch of marks on it. Could be mill, could be MOA. Regardless, these are references. We would zero this at 50 yards. Let's actually shoot and see where we're at 50 yards. Let's shoot it to the screen here. But you would, sight this in at 50 yards. And what the reticle is going to do is it's going to work for you. Let's see, we're pretty good there. So the reticle is going to work for us. We're going to parallax to 100. I'm going to zoom in a little bit. We can't shoot our zero here, right? Let's try that. We aimed at 50, we hit at 50. If we do that at 100, well, that just misses the target, right? So we need good, accurate subtensions or things on the reticle to give us an idea. There's a ton of free ballistic calculators, or you can just do it yourself at home by figuring out where you need to hold. But my beef with BDCs is they're gonna give you 2 to 3 dots, not all the information you see here. And they're gonna tell you that that's good at like 0 to 25, and then at 50, 75, and 100, those are your BDC dots. Well, the reality is that actually doesn't work. Let's do 1. So that's that big line there, 1, and then we're gonna go to, let's try like 1.7, 1.8. Yeah, there we go. So those 3 reticles, or those 3 BDC dots, they're gonna tell you what they're good for. In reality, they have no idea. That's true for one velocity of one projectile. So what happens if you're not shooting that projectile, or even if you are, but you're shooting in a barrel that's slower or faster? Well, they no longer work. The argument I would typically hear back on that is, well, you can graph it out yourself, right? Yes, and that is true. Just like with this reticle, if we didn't know what our dope was, data on previous engagement, we could just go, okay, well, I'm zeroed at 50, let's try 1 mil to this. Okay, that didn't work. Let's shoot again, let's try 2 mils. I'm like, okay, that's right around 2 mils. So we know our dope is 2 mils. You could do the same thing if you had 3 little dots, but how limited are you? And if you can't tell, look at how much this has changed from 50 to 100 yards with a 22. If you want to reliably hit targets, let's go to another target here. This target is about, where are they at? About 80 yards, let's parallax in. We're just, okay, so maybe that 2 mils was gonna work there. Okay, we actually, it looks like we hit the target there. We didn't, we hit the T-post. So if we were shooting at something, we're not gonna hit it. So that's kind of my beef with those kind of reticle systems. It's just, they're good at selling you on it, but in reality, they're not really good at anything. Now, a simple duplex reticle, a reticle without all this stuff in it, just a simple crosshair, if you're gonna shoot a fixed distance, why not? That's great, have at it. Get that with an adjustable parallax so that if you wanna shoot at a further distance, you can figure out what your dial needs to be, but you can adjust and be more accurate. But for the love of God, stop buying those BDC reticles. It will pay off dividends no matter what you do in shooting to just get a typical Christmas tree style reticle, or a reticle with mill or MOA markings. Do a little bit of looking around on the internet, learn this, go out and shoot your rifle, learn it, and you are gonna be way, way more accurate as a result of it. Just from shooting 22, I can pretty much tell you, just from experience, and I'm not a scientist, you know, what things are what. And this ammo's not even something I would normally shoot, but 4 mils, that's 150 yards. If I had more distance, we could continue this experiment out to distance. I don't know what the wind's doing. See if we can get lucky. But it just is that useful, and it's gonna make you that much of a better shooter. So at this point in the video, you might be asking yourself, well, what scope do I buy then? You told me not to buy a BDC, you told me not to buy something without adjustable parallax. Well, really there's a ton of great options. First focal plane, second focal plane, that's kind of up to you. This is a first focal plane scope, and as you can see on a first focal plane scope, as we zoom in, the reticle gets bigger with the image. That can be good or bad depending on what you're trying to do. I'll tell you this, unless you were planning on engaging targets over multiple distances, a first focal plane is probably not what you want, because on a second focal plane, the image grows, the reticle stays the same size, so you're pretty much always gonna have that perfect reticle size. There's people on a first focal plane who will complain and say that's too small at low magnification and it's too big when you get up here. And it's a personal preference. This is something you're gonna see a lot of practical shooters shoot, mostly what I own. But if you don't need that, then get the second focal plane. The part that makes this super important as a first focal plane is that no matter what my magnification is, let me get back on 100, the holds will always be the same. If I was zeroed for 50 yards shooting at 100, no matter how far I come in, my hold is gonna remain the same. I think we're out of ammo actually. So it will be the same regardless. I just continue to hold that. On a second focal plane, as you zoom out, your indicators on there are obviously staying still and the image is growing, so they're gonna be different. They're only gonna be true at a certain power. Usually if it's like a 5 to 15, it's gonna be like 10 power, but the scope will tell you that. So you'll have to go back to that exact magnification, make your hold, and then shoot. So if you're engaging targets across multiple distances, or that's something you like to do, go with the first focal plane. If you don't, if you shoot a static target and you want that reticle just to be perfect size all the time and you don't need to make holdovers, then yeah, go ahead, and that second focal plane is gonna be totally fine for you. Besides that, on what you should be looking for, I would be looking for adjustable parallax on everything, a good reticle, and a reputable company, right? You can go to box stores and you can buy Vortex optics. A lot of times the reticle options aren't gonna be real great. You're talking the Crossfires, the really cheap stuff. But there are so many companies, guys, that are selling scopes online and even in box stores now. If you don't mind going Chinese, there are a ton of Chinese scopes right now that are making full feature scopes. Full feature that, you know, they don't have the clarity of a Japanese scope at a $2,000 to $3,000 price point, but they have all the features and good enough glass to do basically almost what anybody needs to do, and you can get those for not a lot of money. But if you are in that $200 to $300 price range, that's what you want to spend, then yeah, the box store, the Vortex, there's a lot of good scopes even on Amazon, and this video isn't an all-inclusive list, but make sure you're getting it from a reputable source and something good. But if you're looking at a $75 scope and it's got a BDC and it's marked as a 22 scope, the reality is that scope is probably really not a 22 scope. It's just a very inexpensive scope that they're gonna market that way so that you'll buy it. And they don't have to spend a lot of money, and you'll feel like you got a really good deal, but in reality, you're missing out. Because you'll be learning a lot more with a scope that you spend $100, maybe $200 more on. And for my NRL 22 and PRS guys, the guys who maybe are just getting into the sport and you started off with a $400 or $500 scope, you're looking to go up, and I get this question a ton. They're saying, Josh, what scope should I get? Honestly, a lot of it's gonna be personal choice. Most of it's gonna come down to budget. And I'm gonna make the case here at the end of this video for you guys, because I don't think this applies to most people outside of really, really competitive people who really wanna shoot at that level, is buy as much scope as you can. Are the gains incremental? Yes, a $1,000 scope is gonna get you 90-something% of the way to a $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 scope. But as you jump up in that money, are you gonna tell a difference? Yes, but it's gonna be on those 1% to 10% range of what you're shooting. If you're shooting at 100 yards, are you gonna see some huge difference in performance? Probably not. You're still gonna see your hits or misses, but when you're out there at 250, 300 yards trying to see something, let's dial up here. Let's see if we can see. Let's go to 4, 6, we'll go to 167 yards. When you're trying to see those little bit of differences, that little limb move, or a little bit of something kick up out at distance, and that's gonna cost you a correction. That could cost you the match, and that would look like it was high left. Okay, we hit it, I just couldn't tell where. hit. Those little things, seeing that little bit of dust, if you need that 1 point, 2 points, 3 points in a match, that's what's holding you back. If you're there, then the clarity is going to get you that. You're going to see that little bit of mist. You're going to see that little bit of lead dust. You're going to be able to make a correction and stay on target or get back on target. So, you know, people ask me, what kind of scope should I get? Look, the Razors are great. The Zerotech's great. There's a lot of great scopes and companies out there, and it's all relative to the price. The Track makes a great scope for the money. It's a Japanese scope. The Zerotech, all these companies, Zico, if you can afford it, even a Tangent Theta. And some people might think that that's silly. Why would you put a $3,000 to $5,000 scope on a 22? Well, my argument is this. If I need it to see effectively for centerfire, why wouldn't I also need it when I'm shooting, yes, less yardage, 300 yards, but a little tiny 40 grain bullet with no trace, and that disrupts no vegetation? It is arguably harder and more taxing on the optic to compete at a super high level in 22 because the bullet is small, there's no trace, and when it hits or when it misses, more importantly, it leaves almost no evidence. There's no 135 grain projectile blowing dirt off the side of the target when you miss. It's a little 40 grain bullet, maybe going 600 feet per second, that's just going to insert itself into the berm with almost no evidence. So you need as good of optics as you can get to see that little bit of disruption. So I hope this has helped you, whether you're new, whether you're a seasoned shooter. Hopefully this helps you avoid falling in that trap of buying those scopes. There is no reason in 2026 to be buying a BDC reticle and a fixed parallax optics. There's just not. There's so many new optics companies out there that are selling affordable full feature optics that everybody can get into. So it's ridiculously attainable. Yeah, you might not be able to go to your box store and get one, but trust me, unless your box store has something like Athlon or they're selling, you know, some of the decent, you know, low-level Vortex stuff, just skip it all together because you're not saving yourself money. You will outgrow that. You will outperform that. That will hold you back at one point or another, especially if you're out here watching this channel. So I appreciate you guys watching. Catch you on the next one. Let's see if we can get one more for the road. Dial back down to 0, 100. Let's see if we can no look one. Maybe this will be a lead into another video, but everybody's always talking junk to me about follow through.